everybody. How are you?
Well,
Good. I'm grateful to see you today. When we were moving into our facility that our church is in Folsom, California, about 17 years ago, we had given everyone the opportunity to go to a local store. There was a local little craft store, and they sold tiles, like 4-inch by 4-inch tiles, and you could paint on your tile whatever you wanted to paint. And so we said, go into the store and paint on a tile whatever you want to say about Lakeside Church, the name of our church, whatever you want to say about it, about the mission, about what it's doing in the community, about what it's doing in your own heart, whatever it is. And so our whole family went in to paint our tiles, Donna and I and our 3 children. And our son, who was about 14 years old at that time, he painted 2 words on his tile. What if? With a question mark. And ladies, your song that you just sang just reminded me of that. And I just was so inspired by my son at 14, just thinking about what a faith-filled question that is. What a faith-filled question you led us in that song. What if God's doing this and you don't even see it? And what if God's working in your son's life at 14 years old and you don't even see it? And what if God is working in your church's life and you don't even see it? What if? So, ladies, thanks for that. All you who sang, I appreciate that. Moms out there, God bless you. Lost my mom about 5 years ago now. And boy, I appreciate what you do, ladies. And we all do. What if your life could be changed by a bathroom book? Is this all right to talk about? You ever? So I was visiting, yeah, so now you can all relax because that's what we're going to talk about. So I was visiting in someone else's home years and years ago, and had to use the facilities. And so I went to the bathroom, and they had a book in the bathroom, and it was full of contemporary proverbs. I'm like, I'm going to read some of the contemporary proverbs. What else am I going to do? So I started, and here's the only proverb I remember from that day in that bathroom book was this: always buy whatever children are selling on a sidewalk. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. That's perfect. That's so helpful for me because one of my challenges in life is I'm not all that generous. I'm a little tight-fisted, So I used to drive past kids doing a lemonade stand, and I'm like, well, look at them. I'm not buying that, because I'm sure that's terrible lemonade or whatever. So then I read this book and this proverb, and it basically became a law of generosity for me. Always buy whatever children are selling on the sidewalk. And now I'll be driving through the streets of my neighborhood or through our city, and I'll see children on the sidewalk, and I lock the brakes up and throw it sideways and pull over to the curb, park my bumper still out in the street, because I gotta buy whatever these kids are selling at the sidewalk. I'm telling you, I have poured out more bad lemonade than you can imagine. Because you pay for it, and they give it to you in a cup, and I'm usually driving in my car when I come across these places. They don't put a lid on it, so now I'm in my car and I'm trying to drive and I taste the lemonade and it's horrible. So I go around the corner and I water the lawn with some, weak lemonade. One day I stopped at a children's sidewalk lemonade stand and I asked them how much the lemonade was. And they said 25 cents. I'm like, that's a lot. So I said, I'll take some. So they gave me my lemonade, and I pulled out $1, and I gave this kid $1. And he takes my $1, and he runs up to the front of the house where the mom is sitting up on the porch watching, making sure her kids are safe from terrorists who buy lemonade. And so he runs up with this $1, and he's like, Mommy, he gave me $1. And I drove away with my bad lemonade thinking, I just made that kid rich. What if a law of generosity could change your life? And what if a law of generosity could change your life, and when you practice it, it wasn't so much about others and what happened to others, but what happened was something in you? Because generosity always shapes others, but do you know that generosity shapes you? And there's something that God wants us to learn about his character, about generosity, where he says, I want you to do this because it's about you, not just about others. There's a law of generosity. It's written in Deuteronomy chapter 24. So if you have your Bible, let me invite you to turn over there. Deuteronomy chapter 24. Let me read for you starting in verse 19. It's written in the law of Moses. It says, when you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. Leave it for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. And when you beat the olives from your trees, don't go over the branches a second time. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow. And when you harvest the grapes in your vineyard, do not go over the vines again. Leave what remains for the alien, the fatherless, and the widow. And remember that you were slaves in Egypt. That is why I command you to do this. What if a rule of generosity could change your life? So here he's talking about something that I don't understand, because I'm not a farmer. But I've seen this around. So Donna and I spent some time driving around, kind of in a big loop, New Hampshire and Vermont, and up Highway 100 and back into New Hampshire and down through the Notch, and beautiful things we got to see this week. But one of the things we saw was hay or alfalfa or grass or something, I don't know, rolled up in big round bundles. Hay, it's hay. I knew someone would know. See now, okay, I'm going to talk about farming. And some of you are probably farmers. When I talk about farming in Folsom, in my town, our town is made up of prison guards and school teachers and high-tech workers, like in electrical and computer engineers and scientists. And so when I talk about farming, they don't know anything about it. So I can tell them anything and they go, oh, that's really cool. That's amazing. When I tell you about farming, you're going to go, that's not even how it works, dude. So forgive me if I get this wrong, but this kind of is how it goes. So here's the law of Moses. He says, whenever you're out there and you're harvesting your grain and you bring it you bundle it into sheaves. You know what sheaves are?
Bundles. Yeah.
Bundles. Thank you, my wife, the farmer. Yeah. Bundles of grain. All right, big bundles of grain. And it reminds me of that old song. Do you remember there's a song about sheaves? Bringing in the sheaves. You ever think about this song? No, I didn't think you probably thought about it, right? Nobody thinks about this song. But here's how it goes. Do you know it?
Yeah.
Bringing in the sheaves, we will come rejoicing, bringing in the sheaves. That's it, right? What does that mean? Okay, so number one, it's a beer song. So how does beer song get in? Sure, I mean, right? It's like, bringing in the sheep, It's really a beer song. I'm really sorry, but that's where it came from. And it's talking about a party. So when they would harvest the grain, they'd get it all back in the barn, and then they'd have a party, like bringing in the sheaves. Yay, what? We'll come rejoicing because we're bringing in the sheaves. Now, when they're talking about it, they're talking about bringing in people who become followers of Jesus. It's about a Christian harvest. It's about our neighbors becoming followers of Christ with us. And there's this harvest time, and it's a celebration. But farmers go through that in their own farming process. They're planting and they're watering in the growing process and in the reaping process. And when it all gets done, they celebrate. In the history of Israel, there were several major celebrations. And many of their celebrations revolved around their harvest processes. So the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of Passover happened right about the time that the barley was being harvested. The Feast of Pentecost happened right about the time the wheat was being harvested, and the Feast of Booths was right about the time that the grapes were being harvested. And every time they do one of these harvests, at the end of it, they'd have a party. They'd have a celebration. Just like in the song, bringing in the sheaves, we'll come rejoicing, because it's party time when it's harvest time. Well, God has this rule of the harvest. He says, whenever you're out there gathering the wheat or gathering the barley or whatever grain you've got out there, and you cut it down, and now it's time to gather it into sheaves. What if you forget a sheaf out in the field? Because there's a lot of debris after the harvest. There's a lot of cut up stuff that doesn't make it into the sheaf. What if you forget one? And that's your profit. That's how you're making your living. You're a farmer, so you got to bring it all in. So what would you do if you had a sheep and you forgot it out in the field? What would you do as a farmer? You go get it. And God says that's exactly what not to do. He says, if you forget one in the field, accidentally, he says, I want you to intentionally not go back and get it. The word go back is the word repent. Here's God telling us not to repent. Yeah, like, hey, that's a good one. That's all right. Here's God saying, don't repent. Don't go back. Leave it out there. Why? He said, because God's saying, I want you to know that I'm a generous God. And I want you, my people, to be generous people. And so I know you left it on accident. But I want you on purpose to leave it there, because there are people in our land, there are people in our community who are foreigners and fatherless and widows. And so I want you to leave that sheaf for them. You know why? Because when they find it, they can take it. And they'll have a harvest. And they will come in rejoicing because of your generosity. You left it there accidentally. I want you to leave it there on purpose. Do you know why? Because then God will bless you. That's what he says. Of course he's going to bless of course he's going to bless the fatherless and the foreigner and the widow. Of course he's going to bless them through that, but he's going to bless you through that when you leave it there. Why? Because you are never more like God than when you give. Don't you want to be like God? Isn't that why we come together to church? Part of the reason, because we're like, yeah, I'm gonna be there today, and I'm gonna learn to follow God. I'm gonna be like God. You're never more like God than when you give. And so the law says, every time you harvest, leave some for others. Every time you harvest, leave some for others. Now, for a farmer, that's like really clear. It's like, okay, I'm going to set aside some barley, or I'm going to set aside some grain, or I know now how it works here in your neck of the woods. Like every time I bring in the maple syrup, leave some for others. It's a good idea. So that's the law of the harvest. It's the law of generosity. Every time you harvest, leave some for others. Now, there's obvious church implications for that. We talk about a tithe sometimes in churches, like. Every time you harvest, that's your paycheck. Every time you harvest, leave some for others. That's the law of the harvest. It's the law that expresses the heartbeat of God. Because God is always generous. We're never more like God than when we give. If you have your Bibles there, turn over to the New Testament. So that was an Old Testament passage. Let's look at a New Testament passage. Look over at Matthew chapter 20. Matthew chapter 20, there's an interesting story about a landowner and some people that were working for him. And I want you to hear the story. Then I want to go back and tell you the story again so it makes sense in our culture today. Matthew chapter 20, starting at verse 1. This is a story told by Jesus. It's a parable told by Jesus. He says this. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire men to work in his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About the third hour, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour and did the same thing. About the 11th hour, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, will you also go and work in my vineyard?" When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about the 11th hour came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "These men who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you've made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "Friend, I'm not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I'm generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Jesus is known for telling parables, and in his parables he would say something like, "The kingdom of heaven is like," and then he'd tell them what it was like. And in this case he says the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who owns a vineyard. So remember this, the story here is about the landowner. Now, if you've been in church very long, you probably know the answer to this question. Who does the landowner represent in the story? I know it's church, so I think the answer should be Jesus. Yeah, well, he's talking about God, right? God's the focal point of this story. You want to know who God is? Here's a story that will tell you who God is and what God is like. The story is not about the people that come at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's not about the people that come at 9 o'clock in the morning, or at noon, or at 3, or at 5, or again at 6 at the end. It's not about those people primarily. It's about the landowner. And the landowner represents God in the story. So here's a story that's going to tell us this is who God is, this is what he's like, and this is what he wants. Now, a story is a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. Right? You ever think of the stories that you know? The story is a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. Isn't that a description of God and his story? God is a character who wants something and he overcomes conflict to get it. So here's a story of the landowner. Here's a story of God as the landowner, and the landowner wants something. The landowner, it says, is the oikodespotes. That's the Greek word for this description here. You don't have to remember that. But those two words, there's two words in that Greek word. There's oikos and there's despotes. Any idea what word we get from the word despotes? Despot, which means what? Bad guy. Means somebody in charge. And often the guy in charge, sorry Mark, sometimes the guy in charge is the bad guy, right? But only because they're a despot and they use their power badly. But here the landowner is called the master of, the one in charge of, a thing called an oikos. Now I'm going to give you a lot more about this next week. On maybe the most important of the talks that I get to bring to you while we're here with you is the one that's coming next weekend. It's about this thing called oikos. Oikos is the Greek word for house, or household, or family, or extended family, or network. All those can be referred to by the term oikos. And we know the word oikos in our world because we have the word like economy. The part of it up front, eco or econ, that's the law of the house. An economy is the law of the house of a nation, or an economy of a family. It's the law of the house. And so here's this landowner. He's the master of the oikos, and God has put every one of us into an oikos. Whether it's your immediate family, whether it's your extended family, or whether it's your network of friends and neighbors and co-workers, or whatever that is, and God calls every one of us to be the servant of our oikos. the servant of those neighbors and friends and family members who God has put on the front row of our lives. Well, here's the landowner. He's the master of his oikos. He's the master of his household and his network. And he wants something. A story is a character of someone it's a character who wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. So here's the landowner, this master of the oikos, and he wants something. What does he want? He wants a harvest. He wants something to happen in his vineyard, and for that something to happen in his vineyard, he needs workers to be able to make it happen. And so he gets up early on this particular day, and he goes to the market because he's looking for day laborers who he thinks he's going to find at the market. Now, in my town, we don't have a market like this. We don't have a place where day laborers come and hang out. Nobody comes to. We have a local chain of grocery stores called Rayleigh's Grocery Stores. What's the one we go to? The bigger. Hannaford, yeah. In our town, you wouldn't go to Hannaford looking for a job for the day. You know, nobody goes to the front door of Intel and goes, "Can I work for the day and make computers like for a day?" Nobody does that. That's not how it works. And when Dawn and I were traveling around, we got to go to several like country stores, you know, around our journey, and fantastic places with amazing sandwiches. And but I didn't see anybody lining up out front, you know, like, "Hey, can I have a job for the day?" You know, and maybe, yeah, hey, that's not beer that Donna's got. That's locally bottled root beer. So you know, that's the local store. I think it's in Danbury. Yeah, oh, good. So yeah, some of you know it's Danbury. So fantastic sandwich there. Anyway, that's not important. But now I can't get that sandwich out of my head, so now I don't know where it is. So we went there. We didn't see anybody lined up to get a job, but I've been in Israel, and there's an ancient city in Israel. The ruins are still there. It's a city called Beth Shan. There's some stories about it in the Old Testament, like at the end of King Saul's life, his life ended at the city called Beth Shan. Well, in this city, and here's the ruins of it, all those columns represent the front doors of stores in the market. And day laborers who didn't have a full-time job, they didn't have their own shop to go to, they would go out and they would stand at the market, at the front of these stores, and they would hope that someone would come that day, that morning, and hire them and send them out in their field to work for that day. So here's a landowner. He comes out 6 o'clock in the morning, and he finds people already dressed, ready to go at the market because they want a job that day. Now, what kind of people do you find dressed and ready at 6 o'clock in the morning looking for work? Hard workers. Like, these are the people you want in your vineyard. If you want to send anybody out there, send out the hard workers. These are the ones who are like, they're out there early. They don't even need an alarm to wake up in the morning because they're always awake before the alarm goes off anyway. They're dressed, they're fed, their kids are dressed and fed, the lunches are packed, the homework's in the backpack. They're diligent, thoughtful, and disciplined. And poor. They do everything right. They follow the rules. They work hard. They do it well. But they're still poor. They're working poor. But they're still poor. But they're good workers. Now, they may be grumpy because it's 6 o'clock in the morning and all that stuff's already been done before they get out there. But they're diligent, they're hard workers. They would have been very much like the Pharisees in that first century world. Do you know something about the Pharisees? They were the ones who did it all right. They were the ones who did it all by the book. They followed the rules. They followed the law to the letter. They crossed their T's and dotted their I's and all the stuff that had to be done. They were perfectionists. But sometimes even the Pharisees had to have a job. And these are the ones who were out there at 6 o'clock in the morning ready to work. And the landowner finds them, and he's happy because they're good people, and they're hard workers, and he's going to get a lot from their work today. So he's happy to have them, and so he shakes hands, and he says, I'll give you a denarius. You work for me for a day, I'll give you a denarius. That was the standard daily wage of a day worker in that generation. And so the worker is like, right on, a denarius for a full day's work. That's great. That's fair. No problem with that. And so they shake on it, and he sends them into his field to work the harvest. To work the vineyard. Now, at 9 o'clock, the landowner goes back to the market, and he finds people out there in the market at 9 o'clock in the morning, ready to work. And he says, what are you doing out here at 9 o'clock in the morning? Now, these are different people. These are not the 6 a.m. people. These are the 9 a.m. people. These are the people that had the baby up all night crying. These are the people who can't find 2 socks that match to put on their kids before they leave today. These are the ones who can't find the homework, or the dog ate their homework, so they got out of the house late. They don't have it all together. But they want to work. And they want to earn something. And so they go out to the market. The landowner talks to them. He says, I don't know why you're doing nothing. They go, we want to work. He goes, I'll pay you whatever is right. First people, the 6 o'clockers, they get a denarius. The second people at 9 o'clock, they get a promise from the landowner, I will pay you whatever is right. And so they go out and they work in the harvest, and they're thinking, wow, if we get 75% of a denarius, we got there late. It's like 75%'s not bad. That's all right. So they're happy. They go out to the field. At noon, the landowner comes back to the market, and there's still people at the market lined up looking for work. Now, who are these people? These are the people that had to go to the doctor in the morning, but the doctor doesn't take appointments, and he doesn't get there till 9, so you have to go wait and stand in line. And then when you get done with the doctor, you have to go to CVS and you got to get your medicine that he prescribed, and then you've had a hard day already, so you got to stop by Dunkin' Donuts and get some coffee and a treat. And so you sort of want to work, but life gets in the way. And the landowner says, go into my field and work, and at the end of the day, I'll pay you whatever is right. The landowner goes back to the market at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's still people standing out there. And he says, why are you out here? Now, these are the different kind of people. These are not the 6 o'clock a.m. people. These are the people that have been out partying all night last night, and they've been out late. They got back into bed late. They have a headache today. They don't really expect to work, but they're going to make the effort to make it look good. And the landowner says, if you go out in my vineyard, I'll pay you whatever is right. The landowner comes back to the market at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. This is known as the 11th hour. This is known as the last minute. He goes back out to the market at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's people standing out there, and you go, well, who are these people? Why are they out here? They don't want to work. They're hoping desperately the landowner doesn't come back and make them work. What they're hoping is that some of the workers will come back early and buy them a drink on their way home. That's what they're really hoping for. But the landowner says, you go out in my field and I'll pay you whatever is right. And so they trudge their way off to the field. At 6 o'clock, 12 hours after the day began, the landowner goes not to the market, but to the vineyard. It's the first time all day that he's shown up at the vineyard. And he gets to the vineyard, and everybody who's there has been working for all day or part of the day or not very much of the day. He gets back there, and it's payday. Now, there's a law of the harvest. Every time you harvest, leave some for others. And the landowner knows the law of the harvest. And so he tells his foreman, who's going to actually give the money to the people that have been working there, he says, I want you to pay everybody. And I want you to start with the people who were hired last. Now, I don't know how far away the vineyard was from the market, but it wasn't like right next door. They had to walk. These guys didn't put in the hours work. And they were out there working, looking for the landowner. Like, is it time? Is it time? Are we done yet? And the landowner says to the foreman, start with the people that were hired last. And so, sure enough, the foreman comes up and he gives them a denarius. A whole day's pay for less than an hour's work. Now, what are the people thinking who came last? They're thinking, I'm coming at 5 o'clock again tomorrow. Maybe. I don't really know what they're thinking, but I'll tell you this, they're happy to get a denarius. Like a full day's pay for an hour's work, that's really good. Now, that's fine for the people that came at 5 o'clock, but what about the people that came at 6 o'clock in the morning? And they were all ready and diligent and hardworking and good people, and they just wanted to work. And they're thinking, wow, if they got a denarius, we're getting 12 times that. Payday! But when the foreman gets to the people that were hired at 3 o'clock, he gives them a denarius. And when he gets to the people that were hired at noon, he gives them a denarius. And when he gets to the people that were hired at 9 a.m., he gives them a denarius. And when he gets to the people that were hired at 6 in the morning, he gives them a denarius. And they're thinking, that's not cool, man. We were out here all day long. We worked our tail off for you. And it was hot, we worked hard, and we did it all day long. It's not fair. You ever hear the fairness doctrine? Yeah. Yeah. Moms, do you have children? If you have children, I don't know where they learn this. Somebody coaches them before they're born or something. I don't know. But they get this idea that it's not fair. And something happens to them and it's not fair. That's called the fairness doctrine. That did not come from God. It came from some other place. But here's his 6 o'clock worker's like, hey, that's not fair. We did all this hard work. He goes, whoa, didn't we agree? Didn't we agree that like you go out and work and I'd pay you a denarius? Weren't you happy this morning? Or are you envious because I'm generous? Remember, the story is not about the workers. We always make it about us. We're like, oh, it's not fair. I worked in the church, and I did this, and I did that, and I did all the work around here. It's not fair. It's not right. How come he gets in? He doesn't deserve it. I mean, that guy, do you know that guy? Do you know where he hangs out? Taverns. Or other places like that. It's not fair. But the story's not about you. You've been working hard. God bless you. You've been working not hard. God bless you too. Because the story's about the landowner, and the story's point about the landowner is that he is generous. It is the nature of God to be generous. And what happens to us sometimes is we're the 6 o'clockers. I'm a 6 o'clocker. I wake up before my alarm every day. I don't need that alarm. I don't know what I'm going to do after 5 weeks of sabbatical because I've been learning to sleep past the alarm. But I'm an alarm dude, man. I can tell you the first day back in my regular office, I'm going to be up and ready to go and diligent, and I'm going to be complaining when somebody else is not. It's me. And so I look around churches sometimes, and we're full of 6 o'clockers, and it's like, way to go. That's how things get done. Except that those of us who are 6 o'clockers often tend to be judgers of others. And God says, are you envious because I'm generous? The word envious is the word evil eye. Do you have an evil eye because I'm generous, God says? And the story is about God. It's about the landowner. It's about the fact that he's generous. And what does God want for his workers? Now when his workers are trying to be like him, go, I want my life to be shaped by God's life. I want to be like God in every way that's possible for me. I cannot be all powerful. I cannot be everywhere present. I cannot know everything. I can't be omniscient. I can't be those things like God. But there are ways where I can be like God. And in every place where I can be like God, I want to be like God. And this story says, we are never more like God than when we give. We're never more like God than when we're generous. And the law of the harvest said every time you harvest, leave some for others. Why? Because that's the nature of God. That shapes our heart to be like God. And he says, when you do that, I will bless you. Not, I will bless others. Well, of course he blesses others when we're generous. But he says, when you do this, I will bless you. And that's what God wants to do. He wants to pour out his generosity on you and on me so that we can be generous to others. With our resources, with our energy, with our attitude, with our heart, whatever it is we have. We're never